From the weakest hunter on Earth to the strongest hunter beyond Earth. Who is Sung Jin-Woo? We're about to find out in this video. Sung Jin-Woo was the weakest hunter in the world. He was a frail E-rank hunter with no special abilities unlike other hunters. The only reason he participated in raids that nearly ended his life every time was because he was the main breadwinner of his family, since his father, Sung Il-won, was presumed dead, leaving him to take care of his little sister, Sung Jina, and he had to help pay hospital bills for his mother, Park Hyung-ki, who developed a condition called eternal slumber, which is a sleeping disorder that causes victims to lose consciousness, and it also depletes their life forces over time. For some time, Jinwoo has been participating in raids, risking his life until a certain D-rank dungeon changed his life forever. Jinwoo was with a team of hunters that included his friend Lee Joo-hee in his D-rank dungeon. Joo-hee was a B-rank hunter who was a healer that would often heal Jinwoo of his injuries. She was always worried and had a crush on Jinwoo due to him having the courage to risk his life so he could provide for his family. After the team of hunters cleared the magic beast, they found out it was a double dungeon as they noticed the pathway. The team took a vote on whether or not to go deeper into the dungeon. Jinwoo was the last to vote, and he voted to keep on going into the dungeon as he needed the money. The team soon found a temple at the end of the pathway. Within the temple was a bunch of huge stone statues. The entrance to the temple soon closed by itself, leaving the team trapped inside. The statues were watching the team, and it was brutal as they were given 3 trials. Hunters were being slaughtered left and right. Everyone was panicking, but Jinwoo tried his hardest to keep calm and was the only one to figure out what the trials were, regardless of his injuries. The remaining hunters followed Jinwoo's lead until the final trial, where the temple doors opened. Hunters were running out one by one. The team leader Song Chio offered to stay behind, but Joo-hee couldn't move her legs due to her exhausting her mana from healing Jinwoo multiple times. Jinwoo offered to sacrifice himself instead. Joo-hee didn't want to leave him behind, but she was knocked out by Chio as they didn't have much time left. He picked up Joo-hee and walked out of the dungeon, leaving Jinwoo by himself. Jinwoo was in deep thought as the statues were closing in on him and giving him fatal wounds until he laid in the middle of the temple, losing so much blood and near death's door. He went deeper into despair as he didn't want to die and wanted one more chance at life. Right before Jinwoo was about to die, a notification popped up saying that he completed all the requirements for the secret quest called Courage of the Weak, and gave him a choice on whether he wants to become a player or not. In that moment, Jinwoo accepted to become a player, and he would soon regain consciousness in the hospital with his body fully recovered. It was presumed that Jinwoo had a second awakening, but he was still an E-rank hunter. Instead, he got access to the system as a player, with them being the only person that could see and know about it. Jinwoo didn't take the system seriously at first, especially the daily quest. That would bite him in the ass as the system gave him a penalty when the time ran out for the daily quest and sent him to another dimension that we'll call the penalty dimension for 4 hours, forcing him to survive and run from giant desert centipedes. After he survived, Jinwoo started doing the daily quest for the next couple days of his recovery, increasing his stats through ability points rewarded to him and slowly getting stronger until the system granted him a key for the incense dungeon, where he will go up against magic beasts like goblins and lycans up until he reached the final boss of the dungeon, the blue venom fanged Kazuka. Jinwoo had to use his bare hands and raw strength to defeat the giant snake, resulting in him leveling up and gaining his first dagger named Kazuka's Venom Fang. Jinwoo went from level 1 to level 18 in his first solo dungeon. At this point, you guys and girls can get a good idea of how the system functions like a casual leveling system in an RPG game. Like any player that grinds for hours in an RPG game leveling up their stats, basically describing myself too, especially when I played Shadow War, Pokemon, and Assassin's Creed. Jinwoo did the exact same thing for the rest of his time in the hospital before he was discharged. Besides him leveling up and increasing his stats, his appearance changed too as he grew taller and his body was more lean with some muscle. Damn near every nurse in that hospital was sprinkling for some Jinwoo after they noticed the sudden change. After he returned home, Jinwoo quickly went to find some work to pay the monthly rent and found a raid team with Hwang Dong-suk as their leader. He also met his soon-to-be best friend Yoo Jin-ho and participated in the C-rank dungeon with them. Jinwoo was suspicious of Dong-suk throughout the raid. By the time they arrived at the boss area, tons of mana crystals worth of fortune was in there, along with the C-rank boss that was a giant spider. The boss was sleeping. Dong-suk left with his crew after telling Jinwoo and Jin-ho to stay in the boss area until they returned with tools to mine the mana crystals. Jinwoo's suspicions would be proven right when Dong-suk and his crew double-crossed him and Jin-ho, trapping them in the boss area so they can take the mana crystals for themselves, hoping the boss slaughters them. The boss soon woke up right after. Jinwoo fought it to survive and to level up if, or I should say when, he defeats it. He puts up a fight in defeating the boss while Jinho was stunned on seeing how capable he was. Jinwoo's level increased to level 21. By the time Dong-suk and his crew returned, they were surprised that Jinwoo and Jinho were still alive while the boss was defeated. When they walked up to the duo, Dong-suk offered to let Jinho live if he took out Jinwoo, but he stood by Jinwoo's side willing to risk his life to defend both of them. Jinwoo all of a sudden got an urgent quest to defeat Dong-suk and his crew to ensure his safety. One of the crew members used a spell to blast Jinwoo, forcing him to make up his mind on taking them out. Plus, he figured if the system wants to use them, then he'll use the system too. Jinwoo defeated them without any effort, leaving Dong-suk as the last one to be left alive, before taking him out, completing the system's urgent quest. Sometime after the incident, while exercising with Gina, Jinwoo realized that he passed the presumed limit for his daily quest, and wanted to test what the true limit for it is. The limit ended up being double what was required to complete the daily quest, and the secret quest popped up rewarding Jinwoo for completing it. He was given a key to the Demon Castle and a notification detailing the reward for completing all floors of the Demon Castle, the Elixir of Life. The Elixir of Life is a consumable potion that can heal any illness, giving Jinwoo the idea that he could possibly use it to cure his mother, Kyung-hee. He wasted no time and went through the gate to the Demon Castle where he would have to fight the boss guarding the entrance named Cerberus. This was a really brutal fight as Jinwoo was levels below Cerberus' level. On top of that, Cerberus had a special ability that doubled his stats for 3 minutes, but Jinwoo came up with the strategy to win by using poison. After he came out victorious, Jinwoo decided not to go into the Demon Castle and level up some more before he could return there. Jinwoo soon participated in a D-rank dungeon and reunited with some of the hunters that was with him during a double dungeon incident that changed Jinwoo forever, including Ju-hee, Cheol, and hunters that abandoned them in a double dungeon. That wasn't everyone though, as a couple of prisoners and a B-rank hunter named Kang Tashik went in the dungeon with them as well. Tashik had a hidden agenda though, as he was paid off to take out one of the prisoners, and he took out any witnesses that he deemed a loose end. The only survivors left were Jinwoo, Ju-hee, and Cheol. Jinwoo was the only one that could stand against Tashik, overcoming his speed and special ability called Camouflage. After Jinwoo defeated Tashik, he gained the runestone for his stealth ability that will help him throughout the rest of the story. This also lets us know that Jinwoo's power was close to B-rank hunter's power. As a way to level up at a quicker rate, Jinwoo decided to raid C-rank dungeons with Jinho and a 2-man team while other hunters wait outside for them. Other hunters besides them had to be present due to the fact that at least 8 hunters are required to raid C-rank dungeons. Jinwoo jumped all the way to level 40 where he met the minimum requirement for the job change quest. But before that, he was approached by the chief of the 2nd Department of Management at the White Tiger Guild, which is one of the top hunter guilds in Korea. He wanted to recruit Jinwoo into the guild, but Jinwoo declined and finessed him by overcharging him 600 million for 3 C-rank dungeons. Jinwoo also wanted the chief to keep what he found out about him off the record so he could still have a low profile. On the next day, Jinwoo went to do the job change quest without doing his daily quest. Keep that info in mind. He would grind a bit to the point he reached level 45 and headed straight to the boss room. This is where he would meet Blood Red Commander Igris. Jinwoo immediately felt the tension in the room as he could tell Igris was more powerful than he was. Igris gave Jinwoo a really tough time, mostly due to the fact he was extremely strong, fast, and skilled with his sword, making him a deadly force to be reckoned with. Jinwoo tried to use his dagger to pierce into Igris' armor, but was too durable to do any damage. He even tried to throw some hands at him, but that didn't work either. Igris was way too powerful no matter what Jinwoo did, and threw him around like a ragdoll, finally throwing him onto the throne where Jinwoo played it off like he was defeated. Jinwoo waited for the right moment Igris would let his guard down so he could stab him in the eye and finish him off with all the strength he had defeating him. The system granted Jinwoo some rewards to claim, including a runestone containing Igris' ability called Ruler's Hand. However, a small twist happened and the job change quest wasn't finished even after Jinwoo defeated Igris. Tons of portals started to open around Jinwoo as enemies were pouring into the room. The system notified Jinwoo to survive as long as possible. The longer he survives, the better rewards granted to him. In other words, Jinwoo was in horde mode. He tried to fight his way through, but with him already exhausted from his fight with Igris, that wasn't going to happen. Luckily, the timer for the daily quest expired and sent him to the penalty dimension since he didn't complete it. But in this instance, not doing a daily quest saved his ass, and he had time to recover for 4 hours and level up by defeating the giant centipedes he surpassed at this point. With minutes left in the penalty dimension, Jinwoo upgraded his weapon and broke the runestone, giving himself the Ruler's Hand ability. Once he got back to where he left off in the job change quest, he made light work of the enemies and took out the mages that were the source of the horde of enemies, officially completing the job change quest. Due to his performance, Jinwoo was able to level up to a higher class, which was the Necromancer class and then the Shadow Monarch class. This unlocked the Shadow Shadow Extract ability. This ability grants Jinwoo the power to resurrect beings from the dead and have them join the Shadow Army under his command. Another thing that makes this part of the story so special is when he came up with one word to say when he wants to extract the Shadow: Arise. He used this ability to extract his first batch of Shadow soldiers, but most notably, he used Shadow Extract on Igris, recruiting him into a Shadow army. Leading up to the next arc, Jinwoo was sleeping until he was woken up by Gina, reminding him that he had to meet with her teacher at her school. During the meeting, and besides talking about Gina's teacher mentioned one of her other students and how she wanted to be a hunter instead of focusing on her studies in school. This student was one of the hunters waiting for Jinwoo and Jinho back when they were going through C-rank dungeons, and she's Gina's friend named Han Sung-Yi. Gina's teacher asked Jinwoo if he could convince her not to pursue being a hunter, and he came up with an idea on how he could do that. Through some connections, Jinwoo was able to participate in a C-rank dungeon with a few other hunters, one of them being an A-rank hunter named Kim Chul. Keep that name in mind for later, you'll see why I said that. Through this, Jinwoo was hoping Sung-Yi would change her mind about being a hunter when he took her with him, but she showed enthusiasm instead, even though she was an E-rank hunter. Things will quickly go wrong when the gate turned red, and the hunter team gets trapped inside a high-level red gate dungeon. Unlike normal gates, a red gate seals its participants inside, leaving them no way to escape unless the dungeon boss is defeated. Jinwoo and the hunters find themselves in an extreme cold region filled with powerful monsters, including ice elves and ice bears. They separated into two groups. Jinwoo's group was chilling while he leveled up some more by slaughtering and shadow extracting ice bears, including the most powerful ice bear he would name Tank. Kim Chul's group was slaughtered by ice elves, leaving Kim Chul as the only survivor. By the time Kim Chul found Jinwoo's group, he'd grown a bit psychotic, resulting in Jinwoo putting him in his place. The ice elves weren't too far behind, and a battle emerged between the ice elves and Jinwoo's shadow army. During Jinwoo's fight with the leader of the ice elves, Kim Chul woke up and tried to attack Jinwoo, but that didn't last, and Kim Chul was resurrected as Iron, becoming another member of Jinwoo's shadow army. With Iron and Igris by his side, Jinwoo was able to defeat the leader of the ice elves. The gate opened up right after for his group to return home. Jinwoo wanted to shadow extract the ice elf leader before leaving, but it failed and he was frustrated. I felt his frustration myself. I mean, just imagine the rank the ice elf leader could have been by the end of solo leveling. After leaving the dungeon, he met the leader of the White Tiger Guild named Baek Yunho. Yunho was showing aggression and trying to get answers from Jinwoo on what happened in the Red Gate dungeon, but Jinwoo was like, "Bruh, you better take your hand off me and show me some gratitude before the system forces me to beat your ass." At this point, no one could tell Jinwoo anything, as his power was around the high A-rank hunter's power, and he's nowhere near his peak yet. Soon enough, Jinwoo was confident enough to go back to the Demon Castle, went all the way up to floor 75, and vowed he'll beat the boss at floor 100 when he returns. In order to level up faster, Jinwoo decided he will get his rank reassessed so he can get access to higher rank dungeons and gear, since he also figured he can't keep his power secret any longer. By the time he went in and tried to get his rank reassessed, the machine used to measure a hunter's rank couldn't read Jinwoo's power due to it being way more than what the machine could measure, making him officially the 10th S-rank hunter in Korea. The leader of the Hunters Guild, a very generic name in my opinion, but we're going past that, named Choi Jungin, tried to talk to Jinwoo and recruit him into his guild, but Jinwoo just walked right past him. Even the head of the Hunter Administration, Go Gunhee, tried to offer Jinwoo a position, but he declined. His only concern was leveling up as fast as possible and seeing what his current strength is before he returns to the Demon Castle, and finally claimed the Elixir of Life to cure Kyunghee. Jinwoo ended up joining a mining team since it was the only opportunity he had at the moment to go into an A-rank dungeon. This dungeon is where he would meet an S-rank hunter and his future wife, Cha Haein. She was able to sense Jinwoo's power and catch him just before he was about to test himself against the A-rank boss. Even Jinwoo didn't notice Haein until she caught him. You guys and girls could say this was love at first smell, as Jinwoo had to turn back to maintain a low profile and passed Haein. The smell Jinwoo gave off immediately caught her attention, and she wanted to smell him again, which caught him off guard like it would to anybody else. Then he was let go after she took a look at his badge. She fell for him hard after this moment, and it makes sense why she ended up being his wife by the end of the story. But we're not there yet, so let's keep going. Jinwoo got the opportunity he wanted to level up when an A-rank hunter named Sun Ki-hoon needed him to carry luggage for him and his raid team. In the A-rank dungeon, Jinwoo witnessed the raid team in action, but when some high-rank orcs appeared, he helped out a little bit. The team could tell if they went deeper within the dungeon, it could get even more dangerous. They retreated and tried to escape through the dungeon gate, but they were trapped. More high-rank orcs appeared and escorted them to the boss room. This reminded Jinwoo of the double dungeon incident. Everyone in the raid team were ready to die and let Jinwoo escape to get help, but they don't know how powerful he is yet. When they arrived and met the dungeon boss, Ki-hoon tried to attack him, but the dungeon boss was too strong and threw him around until Jinwoo saved them. With Ki-hoon's permission, Jinwoo and the Shadow Army took down the High Orc Army. Haein and Chief Inspector Woo Jin-chul came in to save the team. Instead, they watched along with the raid team, witnessing what Jinwoo was capable of as he took care of everything. Jinwoo was able to shadow extract most of the High Orc Army, including the leader, who he would name Tusk. After the incident, Gunhee wanted to reevaluate and personally see Jinwoo's abilities. With no surprise, it shocked the hell out of him, and Jinwoo was given a card that officially makes him a licensed S-rank hunter. Without any more time wasted, Jinwoo went back into the demon castle and fought all the way up to floor 80, where he met the demon princess Essel. With her, Jinwoo gained more progress until he reached floor 100, where he had to fight the demon monarch Baran. Jinwoo had a tough time fighting Baran to the point he was drained of all his mana, and Essel saved him by distracting Baran, giving Jinwoo the moment he needed to invest all his strength into one final punch. With Baran defeated, Jinwoo leveled up to level 97, was finally able to craft the elixir of life, and got a new ability called Shadow Exchange. This ability lets Jinwoo switch places with the shadows, making it a quicker way to travel. As a bonus, he shadow extracted the wyvern Baran was riding on and named it Kaizel. Jinwoo said goodbye to Essel and went straight to the hospital to give his mother the elixir of life, and it worked as she was cured of her eternal slumber. Jinwoo felt so relieved and rewarded for all the effort he put into that moment he hoped for, as him and Gina were reunited with their mother after 4 years. The family reunion didn't last long, as Gun-hee contacts Jinwoo looking for his help in the 4th Jeju Island Raid. Jinwoo thought about it being a golden opportunity to level up, but since his mom was back, he wasn't so sure. All of a sudden, he could sense the power of all the S-rank hunters training. Gun-hee chuckled as he was amazed Jinwoo could sense them from where they are, and took him to watch the S-rank hunters train with the other S-rank hunters that flew in from Japan. Jinwoo witnessed the Korean hunters train with the Japanese hunters in 2 separate teams, until he had to step in and save Heian after she accidentally went a bit overboard with training, causing one of the Japanese hunters to go crazy. The top S-rank Japanese hunter, Goto Ryuji, saw Jinwoo stop the other Japanese hunter and wanted to have a one-on-one sparring match with him. Jinwoo accepted Ryuji's invite on one condition: Ryuji can't hold anything back, which surprised him. And Jinwoo made that condition because he secretly wanted to test his strength, since he beat Baran not too long ago in a demon castle. And what better way to test his strength than against Japan's top S-rank hunter? The sparring match soon started, and it was already one-sided to begin with, as Jinwoo was smiling and treated Ryuji's attacks like light work. He dodged every attack Ryuji could throw at him. Jinwoo could tell Ryuji was getting a bit more lethal with his attacks, to the point the system gave him a notification about it after Ryuji left a small cut on Jinwoo's face. Jinwoo caught Ryuji's hand, stopping his attack. Both hunters were about to go in on each other until the other hunters noticed and had to stop the sparring match. This sent shivers down Ryuji's spine, as he never encountered a hunter as powerful as Jinwoo before, and I'm kinda disappointed they didn't include the look Ryuji gave after his fight with Jinwoo in the anime, but that's just a little nitpick of mine. It's still great either way. Jinwoo went to talk to Gun-hee after training was over and let him know that he wasn't going to participate in the Jeju Island Raid. On the day of the raid, Jinwoo was doing his daily quest and noticed barely anyone was outside. This was due to the Jeju Island Raid live broadcast, and people didn't want to miss it. Jinwoo felt like the hunters couldn't complete the raid without him, but he was proven wrong when the Ant King showed himself and slaughtered most of the Japanese S-rank hunters, including Ryuji. Heian was easily put into critical condition after getting hit once from the Ant King. The S-rank healer named Min Byung-gyu had his head eaten by the Ant King, and the rest of the Korean hunters were in bad shape. Thankfully, Jinwoo secretly had a shadow hidden on the hunters for him to use Shadow Exchange. Jinwoo came in saving the hunters and healed them of their injuries, but Heian was far too injured for Jinwoo to heal her. The Ant King soon presented himself to Jinwoo, leaving the hunters to watch Heian while he takes care of the Ant King. We get this freaking dope ass shot of them facing each other, both beings confident one will beat the other, one of these beings not knowing what he got himself into. The Ant King throws the first punch, resulting in a shockwave and the ground cracking under them. Jinwoo ate that punch, returning a death stare at the Ant King, letting him know that he done effed up now. Jinwoo returns the favor by giving him an even more powerful punch, and from then on in that fight, the Ant King was shocked at the sheer strength and power Jinwoo possessed. He tried to beat Jinwoo with strength, speed, durability, and even reinforcements in the form of a horde of ants, but none of that worked, scaring the hell out of him. The Ant King tried to flee for his life, but Jinwoo was like, "Where you going?" and finished him off. He was now level 99, but he didn't have time to celebrate as Heian's condition got worse. With quick thinking, Jinwoo had to resurrect Byung-gyu in order to heal her, saving her life. Yunho asked Jinwoo to release Byung-gyu due to him not liking violence when he was alive, and Jinwoo agrees, releasing him from his shadow army. After the hunters left Jeju Island, Jinwoo stayed behind clearing out the ants, leveled up to level 100, and used shadow extraction on the Ant King. He named him Beru, and his shadow would be one of his strongest soldiers. Jinwoo did try to recruit the Ant Queen too, but Beru gave him valid reasons on why she wouldn't be much use in his shadow army, resulting in her shadow being released. After the funeral honoring the hunters that died during the Jeju Island Raid, Jinwoo considered creating his own hunter guild and was approached by the senior official of the Federal Bureau of Hunters, Adam White. He mentioned how the Bureau's deputy director, Michael Connor, was impressed with Jinwoo's abilities on Jeju Island and wants to meet him so he can recruit him. Adam even said that they have exclusive information to give to Jinwoo. Jinwoo wasn't that convinced until Adam mentioned a certain awakened being called an upgrader. This rare type of hunter can enhance the abilities of other hunters. When Jinwoo met Michael Michael offered him instant American citizenship, but Jinwoo was more interested in the upgrader. Michael called for the upgrader named Norma Selner to enter the room. The Bureau offered to let Norma enhance Jinwoo's abilities as a gift, but that wouldn't go well. As soon as Norma used her abilities, all she could see was darkness and something looking back at her that scared the hell out of her, letting her know that Jinwoo's abilities were something else entirely. The meeting had to be rescheduled after the sudden shock. Later on, Jinwoo was thinking about what Norma could have saw until he was interrupted and got an urgent call from Gunhee about a B-rank gate appearing. Jinwoo went in to clear it without any effort even after it turned into a red gate and went to meet with Jinho at the new guild office. Finances weren't a concern for Jinwoo's guild, but Jinho mentioned that they still needed a third member to establish the guild and they need a name for the guild. Their conversation was interrupted when they got a surprise visit from Haein and were left in shock when she wanted to join their guild. Jinwoo was wondering why Haein wants to join his guild so badly and risk her contract with the Hunters Guild. After Haein gave her a reason, Jinwoo decided to give her initiation that he secretly made up to join the guild. He made her fight Igris, but after she surprisingly beat him with minimal effort, Haein was dissatisfied and wanted to fight Beru. Jinwoo didn't want her to fight Beru at first due to the possibility of her still having trauma from almost dying because of him when he was the Ant King on Jeju Island. But Jinwoo summoned him anyway and commanded him not to hurt her. Going into the fight, Beru was already too strong for Haein, but she still didn't give up and landed a hit on him. This made Beru go crazy, reverting him back to his basic instincts. Jinwoo stopped him just in time and Beru begged for his forgiveness. As he looked back at Haein, Jinwoo let her know that she didn't have to risk her life for a nameless guild and wondered that she was doing all this because she liked him. Haein confirmed she did like him, and this lets us know how far she'll go to be with Jinwoo. Back at home, Jinwoo looked at himself in the mirror and wondered about his appearance. He asked Gina for her opinion on his appearance and she gave him a response like any sister would by saying that he looks like a bum. As they talked, Jinwoo brought up on how his guild still needs an official name, and Gina came up with one recommending that he should name his guild the Ajin Guild. Jinwoo later talked to Jinho about the name and they agreed to officially name the guild that, but they still needed a third member. Jinwoo didn't think Haein was suitable to be the third member, and as they were thinking, they would be interrupted by a visit from the leader of the Knights Guild, Park Jung-soo, and two of his other guild members. Jung-soo explained and told Jinwoo about a massive gate that opened up in Busan City. They needed an S-rank hunter to go through the gate, and Jinwoo was the perfect hunter to help them. Jinwoo negotiated with Jung-soo and came to an agreement before joining Jung-soo's assault team. On the next day, Jinwoo arrived and went through the gate with Jung-soo and his assault team, but his time with them was cut short when he sensed his shadow high orcs fighting with other high orcs at Gina's school. A gate all of a sudden opened up in Gina's school, and Jinwoo quickly left the raid. He commanded Beru along with a few shadow ants to take his place in the raid with Jung-soo's team and went to Gina's school as fast as he could on Kaisul, since he couldn't teleport with Shadow Exchange at that time. Jinwoo crashed into the school and hugged Gina, letting her know that she was safe while she cried in his arms. He commanded Igris and some shadow soldiers to escort the students out while he deals with the high orcs. Jinwoo aimed for the chief high orc that left the major handprint on Gina's face, grabbed them, and demanded answers. The chief high orc was scared and told Jinwoo that a voice in his head was telling him to slaughter all humans. Jinwoo asked if that included him as well, but the chief high orc kept asking for forgiveness. Jinwoo finished him right then and there, especially after looking at all the students that were slaughtered. After the authorities came to Gina's school to help the survivors, Jinwoo had to talk with Gunhee on how there's been a lot more gates appearing recently and that damn near every country was interested in meeting Jinwoo. Gunhee let Jinwoo know that if he ever wanted to leave Korea, the country would struggle due to the amount of S-rank hunters left, and the association will provide every resource Jinwoo will ever need to keep him in Korea. With that in mind, Jinwoo requested to go into high-rank gates alone. It surprised Gunhee, but he responded that he'll do everything in his power to make Jinwoo's request happen. Soon enough, Jinho found a third member for the guild, which was his cousin, Yu Soo-yeon. She was a certified A-rank hunter and one of the famous members of Jinho's family. Jinwoo met Soo-yeon at the Ajin Guild office. She was in awe due to her getting the chance to meet Jinwoo for the first time and wanted to post a selfie with Jinwoo and Jinho so she could post it on social media. Now that the Ajin Guild was established, it was time for their first dungeon raid. Jincho wanted to go with Jinwoo and Jinho to see if it was safe enough for them to raid the dungeon, and he was in utter disbelief as Jinwoo's shadow army took care of most of the magic beasts within the dungeon. By the time they arrived at the boss area, Jinwoo called back his shadows and wanted to face the boss by himself. Jincho was confused on why Jinwoo did that, and he responded that he didn't want to rely on his shadow army for everything because it would dull his skills in the long term if he did, which makes complete sense. You don't want to be a leader or a lazy king that just sits all day and lets your soldiers do all the work for you. There are times where you have to lead by example and hone your skills. It reminds others, especially your followers, one, if not the main reason why they respect you enough to lead them. Jinwoo took down the boss with minimal effort, leveled up to level 101, and used shadow extraction on the boss. He named his new shadow soldier Jima. On his way to the guild office, Jinwoo reflected on reaching level 101 until he met up with Heian, who of course was shy around him, but she did have something urgent to tell Jinwoo regarding his power. Yeongju gave a warning to Heian in her dreams about the power within Jinwoo, and he needs to be careful. This made Jinwoo more curious about the source of his power, leading him to later return to the double dungeon that granted him the system. He told the hunters to leave the dungeon and he'll handle it. Then he opened up the doors of the temple, went in, and the doors sealed shut behind him. Memories flooded through his mind from when he was there during a double dungeon incident, and he sensed that one of the statues had mana that was hidden so well. That statue showed his creepy smile with red glowing eyes. Then it ordered the rest of the statues to move towards Jinwoo Raid to fight. Jinwoo was about to summon his shadow soldiers, but the statue snapped his fingers and prevented Jinwoo from summoning his shadow army along with the ability to use his other gear and potions that could aid him. Jinwoo was on his own facing the statues by himself until he went up against the statue with a creepy smile, who soon revealed himself to be the architect, creator of the system. The architect was more powerful than Jinwoo imagined. Jinwoo felt intense pain from every punch the architect threw at him, forcing him to strategize. The architect was also fast, but Jinwoo knew he could beat him. He quickly adapted to the situation, taking the architect by surprise. Jinwoo was getting faster and faster, cutting off each of the architect's arms, not letting up with his momentum. By the time Jinwoo beat the architect, he revealed that the answers Jinwoo wanted all along was within him. A notification soon popped up from the system mentioning hidden data. Jinwoo accepted to learn what was in the memories the system stored, and he started to witness Ashborn, the original Shadow Monarch, and the Shadow Army containing thousands of shadow soldiers. Jinwoo was amazed on how easily Ashborn defeated his enemies, leaving one enemy left, who was revealed to be Baran, the Demon Monarch. If you're confused on how that's possible, to make it simple and answer that quickly, the Baran Jinwoo faced was basically a clone of the original Baran Ashborn defeated. Jinwoo all of a sudden found himself within the body of Ashborn. He noticed a black heart was beating in his chest next to his heart, and the memory was cut off right after. Back in reality, Jinwoo was in a trance while the other hunters, including Heian and Jinchul, came in to help rescue him, but they were in big trouble as they were outmatched by the rest of the statues and the architect. Jinwoo finally woke up and beat the architect's ass, questioning him on what he did to him. But the architect didn't know himself, as Jinwoo's body was supposed to be taken over by now, but that wasn't the case, angering him. Jinwoo gained a huge power boost with the newly acquired black heart, and his mana energy increased to over 100,000. The architect was trying to take control of the system, but he was denied access over and over again. Jinwoo asserted his dominance, fully integrating with the system and reshaping it according to his will. Then he destroyed the architect and saved the rest of the hunters from the other statues. They all soon left the double dungeon, and Jinwoo passed out from pure exhaustion. 3 days later, Jinwoo finally woke up in the hospital and went home. He watched the news about giants who came out of an S-rank gate, causing a lot of damage in Japan, and hesitated on going after Gina admitted she didn't want him to go. Jinwoo knew why she said that. After the incident at Gina's school, Gina was still traumatized. Later in the day, Jinwoo was on his way to the guild office, but was suddenly stopped when Jinho's father, Myung-han, wanted to talk to him at his office. This sudden meeting made Jinwoo wonder until Myung-han mentioned that he had the eternal slumber illness Kyung-hee had. This surprised Jinwoo, and Myung-han was wondering if Jinwoo could save his life, since they found out Kyung-hee woke up from her eternal slumber. But Jinwoo lied, saying he couldn't help him. It's not because he was a selfish bastard, but Jinwoo has a finite supply of the elixir of life in his inventory that he has to use wisely. It's not an easy decision to make, and he thought if he helps Jinho's dad, what's to stop others from approaching him to heal a loved one of theirs if they hear about this? It's something to keep in mind. Later on, Jinwoo went to meet up with Jinho. He didn't talk to him about his dad, but he made up his mind to go to Japan and help since the situation got even worse than imagined. By the time Jinwoo and Jinho arrived at Japan, there were 30 giants that already escaped the S-rank gate, and Jinwoo shadow extracted 29 of them and recruited them into a shadow army. The one giant that got away was already in the ocean far enough from Japan and was defeated by another S-rank hunter. Jinwoo noticed a disturbance when the gate was sucking in mana from the giant he had defeated and presumed was the boss. He went through the gate to investigate. Soon enough, Jinwoo encountered a towering, chained giant deep within a dungeon, the King of Giants, one of the Monarchs. This giant was calm, intelligent, and capable of speech. He wanted Jinwoo's help in breaking his chains and releasing them. In return, he will help Jinwoo and share everything he knew about the Monarchs, rulers, and the upcoming war. He also warned Jinwoo that the Monarchs and the rulers would soon have their war on Earth, resulting in everything being destroyed. Despite the tempting offer, Jinwoo remained wary, sensing the lingering malice and hatred within the giant monarch. When Jinwoo asked if the King of Giants was on the side of humans, he got his answer when he didn't get an answer back. Jinwoo refused the deal, deciding to finish off the King of Giants rather than risk the consequences of setting him free. Jinwoo leveled up to level 122 and was now fully aware of the upcoming threat, motivating him to level up more to prepare. After returning to Japan, Jinho got an urgent call, and Jinwoo noticed how worried he looked. He knew it was about Myung-han. After eavesdropping and witnessing how Jinho broke down in the hospital, Jinwoo decided to use the elixir of life to cure Myung-han before quietly leaving the hospital. On his flight back from Japan, Jinwoo was approached by Adam. The conversation they had led up to Adam bringing up a few incidents that occurred and mentioned that his father, Il-hwan, was a suspect of those recent events. Jinwoo was angered by this and used the ruler's authority on Adam, threatening him that he would not exit the plane alive if this was a sick joke. Adam reassured that it wasn't any joke. The reason he mentioned Il-hwan involves the International Guild Conference filled with representatives from the world's leading guilds. The American Hunter Guild intends to issue a red notice for Il-hwan in the conference due to the U.S. Hunter Association losing a national level hunter in one of those recent events. They're willing to do anything to catch any potential suspects. Adam wanted Jinwoo to notice in this sudden meeting so he wouldn't be blindsided when they show Il-hwan's face at the conference he was invited to as Korea's representative. Jinwoo's mind went wild as thoughts of his dad returning as a monster seeped into his head. Later on, after Jinwoo arrives in America, Adam wanted to escort him to the Hunters Bureau headquarters. On the way there, Adam mentioned Kamish, the strongest dragon and the most powerful magic beast ever slain, and Kamish's runestone that contained an exclusive skill he thought Jinwoo might be interested in. Jinwoo was shown images of the runestone and Kamish's corpse, but he was more interested in Kamish's corpse to Adam's surprise. After his request to see Kamish's corpse was approved, a high-ranking American government official named David Brennan escorted Jinwoo to see the corpse. To their disbelief, Jinwoo used shadow extraction on Kamish's corpse. The dragon was resurrected but for a short amount of time due to it being dead for 8 years, and it faded away. Jinwoo found out that Kamish served under the Monarch of Destruction but was really frustrated that he couldn't add the dragon to his shadow army. That was one of the most disappointing moments in soul leveling in my opinion. I mentioned earlier on a what if Jinwoo kept the Ice Elf leader, but damn, he's nothing compared to a dragon. The amount of power Jinwoo could have gained if he recruited Kamish into his army would have been almost boundless. What a waste. Later on, Jinho was suddenly missing and Jinwoo was very concerned. He commanded hundreds of his shadows to look everywhere for Jinho until he was found. Jinwoo used Shadow Exchange, arriving at the facility Jinho was held, and found out Hwang Dong-soo, an S-rank hunter under a national level hunter named Thomas Andre, was the one who kidnapped and tortured Jinho. Dong-soo held a grudge against Jinwoo for the death of his brother Hwang Dong-suk back when Jinwoo first met Jinho in the C-rank dungeon raid. Jinwoo was fuming with rage and punched Dong-soo so hard he went flying. Jinwoo wanted to know if one of Dong-soo's men could heal Jinho and demanded they heal him, but when they showed how useless they were, he knocked them out cold. Dong-soo soon came back thinking he could take Jinwoo on and demanded answers on what happened to his brother. Jinwoo responded with one of the most cold and badass responses by saying you can ask him when you see him again. Dong-soo underestimates Jinwoo, believing that he can overpower him due to his status as an S-rank American hunter. However, Jinwoo is now far beyond S-rank. In a one-sided battle, Jinwoo completely dominates Dong-soo, showcasing his overwhelming superiority. With a broken body, Dong-soo realizes that he has no chance of survival. Thomas soon arrives, telling Jinwoo to stop and he'll forget this encounter since he told Dong-soo earlier not to do anything rash and stupid as to mess with him or Jinho. Jinwoo responded and said what if he doesn't, resulting in Thomas challenging him. Both hunters stood against each other face to face, and Jinwoo didn't show any signs of fear towards Thomas. He ordered Igris and Kaiso to get Jinho to the nearest hospital while he prepares to face Thomas and the rest of his guild with the Shadow Army. The Shadow Army took care of the hunters from Thomas's guild while Jinwoo and Thomas battled. It was titans clashing as Thomas surprised Jinwoo with some of his abilities, but Jinwoo was too much for Thomas, forcing him to transform into his most powerful form. Even with the durability of his armor, Thomas couldn't take the brute force Jinwoo was using to beat him senseless. Jinwoo kept punching him again and again while everyone else helplessly watched. Thomas's armor was cracking, but Jinwoo kept going. He couldn't believe the power scaling difference between him and Jinwoo. Jinwoo finally stopped hitting him when Thomas admitted he was beaten. Jinwoo disappeared right after and ended up back in Korea chilling on top of a building while he assigned Beru to use his healing abilities to help Jinho recover faster. It's revealed Jinwoo took Dong-soo's life and turned him into a shadow named Greed, after Dong-soo's greed was the reason for his death. Jinwoo quickly shadow exchanged back to America to participate in the International Guild Conference. As soon as he entered the conference room, his aura changed the atmosphere, automatically letting others know of his presence. He stayed quiet and listened as they showed his father on the screen being a prime suspect for recent incidents. They even showed footage of Il-hwan after he whooped Dong-soo's ass months prior. Greed appeared and confirmed it was Jinwoo's dad. As multiple conversations started involving Jinwoo's father, a hunter from China named Liu Zhigong, who's actually the S-rank hunter that took down a giant that went in the ocean, asked what Jinwoo would do. Jinwoo responded that if his father was the monster of the Saiyans, he would personally take care of him. Otherwise, if Il-hwan is innocent, Jinwoo won't hesitate to hunt down any hunter who threatens his father's life. After the conference, Jinwoo was approached by David, who wanted him to have a talk with Norma. She was concerned about the lives of certain hunters and who was taking them out, out, leading to Jinwoo connecting the dots, thinking that the Monarchs might be responsible for certain hunters dying out. She asked Jinwoo to protect those hunters, and after a minute of thinking about it, Jinwoo agreed to protect them. Thomas soon approached Jinwoo during a hunter banquet and wondered why Jinwoo didn't take him or his whole guild out with his shadow army. Jinwoo responded that him and his guild were innocent. It was only Dongsu that was guilty and the only threat that had to be taken out after what he did to Jinho. Thomas was surprised on how much humility Jinwoo showed, and they made peace with what happened. After Thomas left, his assistant let Jinwoo know that Thomas likes to give gifts as tokens of gratitude. Jinwoo responded that he wouldn't mind a new dagger. Back in Korea, after some time passed, the Frost Monarch made his move by attacking Gunhee. Jinwoo came to the rescue looking to fight the Frost Monarch. Gunhee was critically injured and Jinwoo tried to battle the Frost Monarch, but he forced Jinwoo to make a choice, to either save Gunhee or keep fighting. Jinwoo went back to protect Gunhee from one of the Frost Monarch's spears. The Frost Monarch got away, leaving Jinwoo by Gunhee's side as he was bleeding out too much. Jinwoo commanded Beru to heal Gunhee, but it didn't work. Jinwoo was about to use the elixir of life, but Gunhee stopped him from using it as he knew his time was ending, and thanked Jinwoo for coming to his aid. Gunhee uttered his final words, telling him on what potential threats and choices will come Jinwoo's way. He pleaded with Jinwoo for him to be on the side of humanity no matter what, right before he passed away. After Gunhee's funeral, Jinwoo was on a hunt for any trace of the Monarchs, and he couldn't find anything for now. Thomas and Leonard Neerman, the most powerful hunter in Germany, visited the Ajin Guild office waiting for Jinwoo. By the time Jinwoo arrived, Thomas wanted to have a meal with him and give him a gift, which was the new daggers Jinwoo mentioned back in America. Leonard wanted to go with him and get protection from Jinwoo, but Thomas quickly shut him down. During their meal, Thomas presented Jinwoo a briefcase containing the new daggers. To Jinwoo's surprise, he could sense how powerful the daggers were as soon as it opened. The material used to make the daggers were Kamish's sharpest tooth, and the attack power was over 1500, making it one of Jinwoo's most powerful daggers. It's even more powerful than the Demon King's daggers and left out a dark aura that changed the atmosphere in the room. The new blades Thomas gifted Jinwoo was called Kamish's Wrath. After Jinwoo showed how much he liked the blades, both Thomas and Jinwoo sensed something was wrong and went to check out what was going on. A large gate had opened up in the sky, but nothing happened yet. Jinwoo used this time to have an intense training session with Beru as a way to prepare for whatever comes out that gate. Then, when he had some time to think, he thought about giving Haein a call to see if she would like to go out with him. During the timeout, they went to the amusement park. Jinwoo used the shadow soldiers to block out the crowd from disturbing their time together, and while walking, Jinwoo asked if she would like to go on all the rides, and she responded that she didn't mind going on all of them. Both of them smiled as they enjoyed their time with each other, regardless of the circumstances that's happening with the huge gate in the sky. But due to them being S-ring hunters, everything they rode on in the park was too slow for them. Hell, let's be honest, she didn't really care about any ride. The only ride that mattered to her was on Jinwoo. In all seriousness though, Jinwoo came up with a better idea by going along Kaiso's back, with Haein taking in the world around them as they soared through the sky. They finished their time together by sitting alone in the secluded area while they watched the night sky. Besides it being a brief pause to the action or next big event in the story, this moment lets us know that Jinwoo cares for and trusts Haein more than presumed, to the point he told her the reason why he picked the amusement park. It's where Ilwan disappeared years prior. He could have spent time with anyone, but the person that he picked was her, foreshadowing them ending up together. After their date, things soon set into motion as the Monarchs made their move. The Beast Monarch Rockin started fighting Thomas. Jinwoo tried to get there, but for some reason he couldn't access the shadow placed on Thomas prior, making him think this was because of the Monarch's influence. From the way I see it, I think it's to give Thomas some spotlight before Jinwoo comes in. Jinwoo rushed to the scene with Kaiso and gave Rockin a brutal kick to his head as soon as he arrived in the battlegrounds. After Jinwoo told Leonard to get himself and Thomas away from the scene, he was going up against 3 Monarchs including Rockin. The other 2 Monarchs were the Frost Monarch and the Plague Monarch. Jinwoo had to stay alert so he wouldn't give them any opening until he was overwhelmed. When it seemed like Jinwoo was defeated so easily, his shadow soldiers came to his aid, and Jinwoo used status recovery to fully heal his injuries to get back into the fight. Jinwoo set his sights on destroying the Plague Monarch, constantly cutting her up using Kamish's Wrath. With only the Frost and Beast Monarch left, Jinwoo quickly sent away the Beast Monarch with an intensive blow, leaving only the Frost Monarch to fight. When Jinwoo thought he had an opening to take out the Frost Monarch, the Beast Monarch used the opportunity to stab Jinwoo from behind. His claws went right through Jinwoo's torso, and the 2 Monarchs ended Jinwoo's life. All Jinwoo could see now as his life force faded away was a notification from the system that the player has died. But in a surprise turn of events, a couple of new notifications appeared saying that since Jinwoo was in possession of the Black Heart, he met the requirements for an unknown passive skill. Jinwoo soon woke up in a dream world and redid everything that occurred up to the Jeju Island Raid until he met Ashbourne. Ashbourne showed Jinwoo his origin, including how he became the Shadow Monarch as well as the origin of the rulers and Monarchs. Ashbourne was able to tell Jinwoo that his will and determination to overcome death death many times over as the weakest hunter in the world, was the main reason he picked him to be his successor. The system was designed to slowly make Jinwoo adapt through levels to handle the full power of the Shadow Monarch. This left Jinwoo with one question, which was why did Ashbourne betray the architect? This made Ashbourne think. He responded that him and Jinwoo made a connection, fusing them into one being. Ashbourne was Jinwoo as well as Jinwoo was Ashbourne. As their time together was about to end, Ashbourne gave Jinwoo a choice to either stay in the dream world or return to the real world, fully reborn as the Shadow Monarch. Jinwoo chose to return to the real world. All he has to do is say one word. You guys and girls already know what it is. Arise. But before we get to that part where Jinwoo cuts loose, Il-hwan came into the scene protecting his son before he came back and fought against two monarchs. I know this video is about Jinwoo, but I have the urge to mention on how Il-hwan is no joke. He gave the Frost and Beast Monarch a hard time. I think he's powerful enough to beat Thomas Andre too if he wanted to. I do wish he had more time in the story. Hopefully he'll get a moment in the sequel series, solo leveling Ragnarok. But back to Jinwoo. With that, the system was deleted, unlocking the full power of the Shadow Monarch. And Jinwoo was back on the battlefield with the full power to Igris and Beru at his side. This got the Frost Monarch shook as Jinwoo's power boost left a major gap between them. Jinwoo quickly defeated the Beast Monarch after he tried to hide from him. Then he defeated the Frost Monarch with ease. Il-hwan left the scene after Jinwoo's resurrection, knowing that he wasn't needed on the battlefield anymore. Jinwoo caught up to him, wanted to have a talk with his father on where he's been all these years. Il-hwan reveals that he was trapped in another dimension after entering a gate. He was chosen by the rulers and was given his strength to defeat the monarchs, including the new Shadow Monarch. But as soon as he found out the new Shadow Monarch was his own son, who had unknowingly become a major player in the war between the monarchs and the rulers changed their mind and commanded Il-hwan to go out of his way to help protect Jinwoo by fighting the other monarchs. He supported Jinwoo from a distance and apologizes for leaving him, Gina, and Kyung-hee behind. This made Jinwoo shed tears despite his past resentment, and he understands his father's sacrifices. Il-hwan, who is essentially living on borrowed time due to his connection to the rulers, starts to slowly fade away. Before leaving him, Il-hwan expresses pride in Jinwoo as he got to witness his son grow into a powerful warrior and hunter. He was a proud father in the end. After everyone celebrated the monarch's defeat, the gate in the sky started showing signs of it opening soon. Hundreds of thousands of hunters gathered ready for whatever is going to come out. Jinwoo was in the front and he could sense something familiar. He told everyone to stop as over 100,000 shadow soldiers came through the gate. It was Ashbourne's original shadow army, including the very first and most powerful shadow soldier, Grand Marshal Belian, leading the army. When Belian landed in front of Jinwoo, he bowed, honoring his liege. Everyone else was in pure disbelief in what they were seeing, but Jinwoo was smiling. This was Ashbourne's gift and inheritance to Jinwoo, his successor as the new Shadow Monarch. A few days later, Jinwoo decided to train with the Shadow Army. Beru was a bit jealous and requested to battle Belian for the title of Grand Marshal. This surprised Jinwoo, but he allowed it. The battle between them quickly became one-sided as Belian beat Beru with minimum effort. Jinwoo asked why Beru wanted to challenge Belian so bad for the Grand Marshal position, and Beru answered him saying he wanted to be by Jinwoo's side at all times. To solve this little issue, Jinwoo said that since Belian is on his right side, then Beru could be on his left side. Beru shedded tears after hearing this, showing how appreciative he is to Jinwoo. Then Igris appeared saying he liked to be by Jinwoo's side too, so Jinwoo responded that Igris could watch his back. As the day went on, Jinwoo wondered and asked Belian what his history with Ashbourne was like, leading him to tell Jinwoo about his time with Ashbourne to end the day off. The day finally came when the Dragon Monarch Antares arrived on Earth. He goes by the Monarch of Destruction too, like I mentioned earlier, but you can go either way on what you want to call him. I'll just call him Antares from this point on. Jinwoo underestimated how powerful the threat was. He went to David to see if he could use Kamish's runestone as a way to combat Antares. Before the battle, Jinwoo called Heian since they haven't seen each other in a while and made a promise to see her again. Then he sat in his castle. Beru and the other shadow soldiers built for him, mentally preparing for the final battle. Belian, Igris, and Beru all appeared, saying that it was too dangerous even for Jinwoo. But Jinwoo reassured them, saying that some fights require bravery and courage to keep pressing on. He began walking while they followed his lead, ready to fight. Jinwoo soon came face to face with Antares while the shadow soldiers deal with and defeat Tarnak, the Iron Body Monarch. Yogamont, the Monarch of Transfiguration, appeared when Jinwoo had the upper hand on Antares after Tarnak was defeated, and his troops were now part of the Shadow Army. Yogamont opened portals for more dragons to come to the battlefield, catching Jinwoo a bit off guard, but he had a trick up his sleeve. Remember Kamish's runestone that he planned on using? Well, Jinwoo inherited a special ability from it just in case something like this happened. The ability was called Dragon's Fear, and this ability immobilized utilizes other beings that are less powerful than Jinwoo, but it can affect his shadow soldiers too, making it a slight disadvantage. To make up for that, Jinwoo had to call back his shadow soldiers before using it. Mana gathered around him as he was channeling it to make a loud roar, immobilizing the dragons that surrounded him, and he even immobilized Yogamon. Right after using Dragon Sphere, Jinwoo took Antares with him and teleported to a secluded area to battle without any worry or risking innocent lives. The real battle begins as Antares transforms into a huge dragon. Jinwoo and his shadow soldiers threw as much as they could at him, but it wasn't enough, forcing Jinwoo to switch his strategy and think outside the box. He quickly came up with an idea to create his own version of shadow armor, and I gotta say, this form is a good ass design. It didn't last in the battle since it took a lot of energy to maintain the form, but it was cool in those few panels. Near the conclusion of the battle, Jinwoo made one more push after he used one of Kamish's wrath daggers to stab Antares in the back and cut him in half. The rulers soon came to the picture and finished the job, officially defeating the Dragon Monarch. Jinwoo was victorious in the final battle against the Monarchs, and the rulers showed their gratitude to him for ending their war with the Monarchs. The rulers wanted to reward Jinwoo for his efforts, leading to him asking if they could use the Cup of Reincarnation to turn back time 10 years before the gates and hunters appeared. Jinwoo wanted the people that died in the last decade to have fulfilling lives, especially his father. The rulers said that they can do that, but they had to let Jinwoo know about the risks of using the cup. If the cup was used, it can't be used again due to it being used multiple times before, which depletes its effectiveness. The Monarchs will come back with their memories intact of the previous timeline. Shadow soldiers that used to be human like Iron and Greed wouldn't be in the Shadow Army anymore, and everyone will forget what Jinwoo achieved and will sacrifice for. After listening to this, Jinwoo stood on his request and was willing to take on the burden of going against the Monarchs as long as the Earth was safe. The Cup of Reincarnation was used and a shining light appeared. When it disappeared, time was turned back 10 years. Jinwoo was a kid as well as Gina. His mother never went through eternal slumber, and he cried as soon as he saw his father back to life. Jinwoo was happy for the short time he had as a kid before leaving Earth to defeat the Monarchs one more time. It took Jinwoo 27 years in another dimension to defeat the Monarchs. Luckily, time was different there, and it's been 2 years on Earth since he left. When Jinwoo came back to Earth, he was greeted by an envoy of the rulers who appeared as a human and wanted to talk to him. He mentioned that the rulers had concerns on Jinwoo's power and how overpowered it was to the point it's more than what Earth could handle. They offered Jinwoo a new world to move to that can handle his power, since he's no longer needed as much after the Monarchs were defeated. After hearing this, Jinwoo cut the conversation short so he could be left alone. It did make him think, what's his purpose now on Earth with all the power he has? He compared himself to nuclear fuel that's dangerous without a purpose. A sudden figure caught Jinwoo's eye, and it turned out to be Heian, reminding him that he still has people he cares for on Earth, convincing him to stay. Jinwoo went to high school and even joined the track team so he could eventually meet Heian naturally, due to the fact he knew Heian was passionate about running track before becoming a hunter in the previous timeline. Jinchul eventually talked to Jinwoo during his time and remembered his past life in the previous timeline. This rekindled their friendship, and he even offered Jinwoo a career in law enforcement as a detective after he's done with school. Jinwoo became a silent guardian of Earth in this new timeline. One example of him fulfilling this role is when Titans were about to invade Earth. Jinwoo was expecting them and summoned a shadow army filled with around 10 million soldiers at this point. Jinwoo beat the Titans with ease and recruited them into a shadow army. After the threat was stopped, he went back to his life as a student and eventually met Kim Chul, who was an Iron in this new timeline. But Kim Chul felt this sudden feeling of love for Jinwoo due to him being one of his loyal shadow soldiers in the previous timeline. Jinwoo erased his memory and wanted him to live his life as a reward for his efforts fighting alongside him. Jinwoo would soon get the opportunity to meet Heian, who recently injured her ankle. He approached her with a calm voice and gave her a warning on the long-term effects of running with an injured ankle. She didn't recognize who Jinwoo was, but she felt a good presence from him and liked the scent he gave off. Jinwoo suddenly healed her ankle and encouraged her to run without any regrets. This piqued Heian's curiosity, and Jinwoo asked him if they met before. Jinwoo responded that if she could beat the challenge he gave her, he'll give her the answer she wants. Later on, they would go on a date. Jinwoo teased her a bit by being mysterious, leading to Heian giving him a challenge which included racing him. If she wins, Jinwoo will have to answer all of her questions. In order to guarantee her victory, she finessed him by telling him if he loves her, then he has to stay still while she runs to beat him. I love how his shadow soldiers were teasing him on how he could lose so easily after everything he's been through. They're basically his family too. Tell me I'm wrong. After Heian won, Jinwoo went up to her and they shared their first kiss. In the years to follow, Jinwoo and Heian got married, pursued their careers, such as Jinwoo becoming a detective and Heian becoming a famous track athlete. They also had a son named Sung Soo Suho, who showed signs of inheriting his father's abilities and surpassing them. Jinwoo had to put a mental block within Suho so he could live a normal life as a kid first before getting his powers back. A new gate appeared in the sky during Jinwoo and Heian's 16th anniversary as potential threats from other dimensions were about to invade Earth. Jinwoo left Earth to wage war against these beings in order to defend his home. As far as now, in the sequel series called Solo Leveling Ragnarok, where Suho is the main character, Jinwoo is still off planet. Let's move on to his skills and abilities. To start off, he has enhanced strength, speed, durability, stamina, and endurance. He's a master at melee combat and dagger wielding techniques. He's immortal and can change his appearance at will, like him taking the appearance of his younger self, for example. He can shadow extract, which resurrects beings from the dead, giving him the choice to recruit them to a shadow army or just cancel them and they'll just move on to the afterlife. Shadow exchange, which lets him switch places with his shadows. Shadow preservation, which preserves his shadow soldiers into storage and monitor them by preserving their senses. Shadow Monarch increases the strength of all his active shadow soldiers by 50% during a fight. He can manipulate memories of others. He has absolute control over shadows and darkness and can reshape them into anything he wants, such as weapons or maybe appearances, like I said before. He can hypnotize others. He can create his own gates. He's fluent in speaking the language of different monsters and magic beasts. He has immense willpower, immense recovery to the point he can recover lost limbs, but he can't recover something fatal as a heart puncture. He's immune to all diseases, poisons, and any abilities that can be harmful to him. The list of what Jinwoo could do isn't over yet, as he has a stealth ability making himself and his presence invisible. He has a bloodlust ability which magically intimidates an enemy into submission and their stats fall by 50%. There's Quicksilver that increases Jinwoo's speed by 30% temporarily. Rules Authority that lets Jinwoo move and control objects through telekinesis. Dragon Sphere, which is a mana-infused shout from Jinwoo's soul, driving anyone weaker than him into a state of intense despair. Mutilation, which Jinwoo can aim for an enemy's vital points before slashing away at them with his daggers, inflicting critical damage on them. And finally, there's Dagger Rush. This ability lets Jinwoo go full savage mode on an enemy with his daggers from all directions. Moving on to his weaknesses, there is a limit to his mana reserves and can run out at a faster rate depending on how many times his shadow soldiers regenerate. And overusing his power can cost him his stamina, such as him having a shadow armor, for example, when he fought Antares. Moving on to nerd facts, since he has the full power of the Shadow Monarch, Jinwoo can shadow extract and resurrect a being through blood instead of a body. Jinwoo does have his own world for his shadow soldiers to flourish in and when they're not summoned, called the World of Rest. Moving on to my personal thoughts, since I started watching Solo Leveling, I say Jinwoo became one of my most favorite anime characters of all time. The journey he went through to get stronger is very motivational to me, mostly due to how he was the underdog and rose up to become one, if not the strongest being in the story. Underdog stories always get me because it always proves that you can go from being at the bottom of the barrel to the top of the food chain with consistency and determination to achieve whatever you want in your life. I don't have too many critiques for Jinwoo. I think his character development has been at a good pace throughout the story, but the pacing and character development for other characters in Solo Leveling are a different story. The anime is fleshing that out a bit, which is good, but I don't think it's enough in my opinion. This video is about Jinwoo, so I don't need to get into that. Speaking of the anime, as far as I heard, the episode where Jinwoo cured his mom got a lot of dislikes just because he broke down, cried, and admitted he was getting stronger because of her. Come on now. Personally, I think that's immature and unrealistic. If you had a parent that went missing, then another parent all of a sudden got an illness that resulted in him or her going into a coma for 4 years, not knowing if him or her is going to live through that, leaving you as the sole breadwinner of the family, that mentally takes a toll on someone even if they're strong as hell. If one of Jinwoo's main reasons to get stronger is to cure his mother after finding out he can do that, if he grinds his ass off in one of the most deadliest dungeons, I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm not saying you guys and girls are one of these people that dislike the episode for that reason. I'm just curious, wouldn't that be a main motivator for you too if you truly care for someone, that you'll go through hell for them? You get what I'm saying? I don't know, it's the internet. Some people's expectations are too high and unrealistic. I just don't know. Besides all that, if you're entertained, thought it was educational, like what I said, or all the above, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment, and turn on post notifications, especially if you're a new viewer. If you want to support the channel even more, my links will be down in the description box below. I'll talk to you guys and girls later. Peace.